bound by shadow and light. Book 1 of the Eternal Balance series. Prelude. In the beginning, two primordial forces shaped existence: Eloria, the light eternal, and Nexus, the abyss unbound. Together, they brought form to the formless void, crafting the universe with their combined powers. Eloria embodied creation, life, harmony, and growth, while Nexus represented destruction, endings, and the stillness that followed. For eons, their contrasting essences existed in delicate balance, entwined in cosmic unity. But Nexus grew restless, hungry for dominion. He sought to unmake the balance, twisting fragments of his essence into shadowy beings of malice, the Wraiths. These creatures, human-like with red-tinged eyes and shadowed forms, became his soldiers, spreading chaos and decay across the realms of light. Eloria, unwilling to let Nexus undo their creation, summoned her full power to craft the Elorians, radiant warriors forged from her light. Embodying courage, wisdom, and resilience, the Elorians were tasked with defending the cosmos against Nexus's growing darkness. For a time, they held the Wraiths at bay, preserving the balance. But Nexus's power was vast, and his forces only grew stronger. As the conflict raged, Eloria realized that her light alone was not enough to defeat him. In a final act of sacrifice, she divided her essence into 5 seals, each representing a core aspect of her being: knowledge, courage, vitality, harmony, and radiance. These seals became the key to imprisoning Nexus in the Void Realm, a dimension of eternal isolation where his power could no longer reach the mortal world. Eloria's sacrifice came at a great cost. Her physical form dissipated, and her consciousness became bound to the seals. Nexus was cast into the void, his rage echoing through the cracks of his prison. Yet his influence lingered. The Wraiths, tethered to his shadow, continued to haunt the realms, seeking to destroy the seals and free their master. To protect her creation, Eloria entrusted the 5 seals to the first families, mortal bloodlines chosen from the Elorians themselves. Each family was selected for qualities aligned with the seals: wisdom, courage, resilience, balance, and creativity. They became stewards of the seals, sworn to shield them from the relentless Wraiths and their dark purpose. Over generations, the first families upheld Eloria's teachings and trained keepers, descendants touched by her lingering divinity. These keepers inherited the sacred duty of guarding the seals and wielding Eloria's light. Through their connection to her essence, they could channel divine energy into weapons, swords, spears, shields, and more, capable of permanently destroying the Wraiths, whose shadowy forms otherwise returned to the void upon death. Protecting the cities where the seals were hidden became their lifelong mission. Though Eloria's light flickers faintly in the mortal realm, it endures through the seals and the unyielding resolve of her chosen. Nexus remains imprisoned, but his whispers seep through the boundaries of the void, urging his Wraiths to destroy the seals and set him free. The battle between shadow and light continues, a fragile struggle where the courage of the few determines the fate of all. Now, Nexus stirs within the void, his whispers spreading through the cracks of his prison. He has chosen this moment to enact his plan to break free, unleashing his full power upon creation. Only the guardians of legend, chosen by Eloria herself, stand in his way. These guardians share a bond that transcends love, partnership, and physicality, uniting them as 2 halves of a single purpose. Their connection, forged in light and strengthened by trust, loyalty, and their sacred duty, allows them to channel Eloria's essence in its purest form. Together, they amplify the power of the seals and fortify the barriers of the void. Only through their unity can Nexus's dark ambitions be thwarted and the balance between shadow and light preserved. The fate of creation rests on their shoulders, the last hope in a timeless battle between light and darkness.
Chapter 1.
Madeline sat at the Eloria Hotel bar, her tablet glowing softly in the dim light. She scrolled through a recent text find that compared different sociological theories about superstition and belief systems. It explored how superstitions functioned as coping mechanisms in different communities, helping people deal with uncertainty and providing a sense of control over unpredictable situations. She found herself particularly fascinated by how similar beliefs arose independently in cultures with no apparent contact with one another. The gala behind her was buzzing with chatter, but Madeline felt no pull to rejoin it. The academic thread before her was far more compelling. The section on how societal norms shape collective behaviors especially intrigued her, and she found herself drawn to the way superstitions bridged gaps between culture, psychology, and social dynamics. She jumped when a hand landed gently on her shoulder.
Lost in thought, or just avoiding everyone?
A familiar voice asked, cutting through her focus. Madeline looked up to see Professor Mark Simmons, her adoptive father, department chair, and longtime mentor, standing beside her with a warm, knowing smile. He had a glass of scotch in hand, his tie slightly loosened, the picture of ease amidst the gala's formal chaos. "A bit of both," she replied with a faint smile, gesturing to the empty seat next to her. "Join me?" Mark slid onto the stool with a sigh, setting his drink down.
You know, you handled yourself well tonight.
"Because I didn't stab David with my fork during dinner?" Madeline quipped, half joking.
That.
Mark said with a chuckle.
And because you kept your head high despite him lurking around like a bad smell.
She snorted, taking a sip of her cranberry and soda. "I don't know if I'd call that an achievement. He's exhausting, Dad. It's like he's got amnesia and doesn't remember that we broke up or what he did to cause it." Mark nodded thoughtfully, studying her over the rim of his glass.
It's not amnesia, it's denial. He doesn't like that you were the one to end it. Men like David. They don't take rejection well.
"That's putting it mildly," Madeline muttered. She set her tablet down, leaning her elbows on the bar. "You know, when I broke off the engagement, I thought it'd be over, that I'd finally have some peace."
And instead, you get this.
Mark said, gesturing vaguely toward the gala.
You're not wrong to feel frustrated, Madeline. But you're stronger than he is. Don't let him see you rattled.
"I'm trying," she admitted, her voice softer. "It's just, everything feels like a performance tonight. Smile, laugh, make nice with people I don't know. Meanwhile, I'm just counting the seconds until I can leave." Mark's expression softened, and he reached out to pat her hand.
I know, kiddo, you did well to last as long as you did. I know this sort of thing is difficult for you. So, if you need to leave, leave. No one would blame you. Or likely even notice.
She gave him a faint smile. "Thanks, Dad. I am just exhausted with it all. As soon as tomorrow is over with, I can get back to my research and teaching, and hopefully some normality." Mark stood, his expression soft.
It will, and remember you deserve to be speaking tomorrow. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Now I better get back in there. Academics and an open bar are not a good mix.
Madeline nodded and smiled, watching as he walked back toward the gala. For a moment, she felt a little steadier, a little surer of herself. Then, just as she turned back to her tablet, a voice interrupted her peace.
"Maddie, babe."
David's smooth, unwelcome tone shattered her concentration. Madeline stiffened but didn't turn around. "David, go away."
"Come on, babe.
David said, his voice smooth but tinged with irritation.
You're being unreasonable. Just come back inside. People are starting to notice."
"Let them notice," Madeline replied, keeping her gaze on her tablet. "I'm not playing your games anymore." David's expression darkened as he leaned closer, lowering his voice.
"This isn't about games. It's about what's right. You owe me that much."
At that, Madeline snapped her head toward him. "Owe you? Owe you? I don't owe you anything, David. Not after everything you've done."
"You're being dramatic,"
he retorted, his tone condescending.
"You always were too emotional about these things. It's why you're here alone, hiding at the bar, instead of acting like the professional you claim to be."
"And you always were good at deflecting," Madeline shot back. "You manipulated me for years, pushed me into corners I didn't want to be in, and then called me too emotional when I pushed back. I'm done letting you twist things." David's jaw tightened, and his eyes flicked toward the nearby patrons, who were starting to glance in their direction. He stepped even closer, lowering his voice further.
"You don't understand how much is riding on this, Maddie. People in there are important to my career, to yours. Showing up together was part of the plan."
"Your plan," Madeline corrected, her voice cold. "Not mine, and that plan ended when I gave back your ring." David's hand landed on the back of her chair, gripping it tightly.
"You're making this harder than it has to be. We both know you'll be crawling back soon enough."
"Crawling back to you?" I don't think so. Madeline's voice was louder now, her anger cutting through the bar's hum. She took a deep breath to steady herself and leaned back in her chair, meeting his gaze directly. Let me make this clear one last time. We're over. We have been for months. I'm not your partner, and I'm certainly not your pawn. David's face twisted into a forced smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes.
You think you can just walk away? After everything I did for you?
You did for me? Madeline scoffed. You didn't do anything but ride on my coattails, David. Don't try and rewrite history. His hand moved to her wrist, gripping it firmly. Before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension.
I believe the lady asked you to leave her alone.
From across the dimly lit bar, Eric watched her, the woman who had caught his attention earlier that day. She sat at the bar, her shoulders slightly hunched as she focused on a tablet in front of her. Her dark red hair, so deep it was almost black, was pinned up in a way that looked both intentional and completely haphazard, as if she'd rushed through the motions without much thought. The effect, though, was stunning, effortlessly elegant and perfectly suited to her. Her outfit was equally striking. Wide-legged, high-waisted trousers in a 1940s style, paired with a white silk top that hung just off her shoulders. The soft fabric shimmered faintly under the light, a subtle contrast to the structured lines of her trousers. She had a timeless, sophisticated look that stood out even in a room full of polished conference-goers. Eric leaned back in his chair, absently swirling the amber liquid in his glass. He'd first noticed her earlier that afternoon when she checked in. She'd arrived with minimal luggage and an air of quiet determination, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke in a clipped but polite tone to whoever was on the other end. He remembered the way she had paused at the counter, thanked the receptionist, and then glanced briefly around the lobby before heading toward the elevators. Their eyes had met briefly then, a fleeting moment, but it had stuck with him. Her expression had been calm but focused, her posture straight and purposeful. There was something about her presence that commanded attention without demanding it, and Eric had found himself wondering who she was and what had brought her here. He'd spotted her again a few hours later as she entered the gala. She'd moved through the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging polite smiles and nods with the other attendees, but never lingering too long. She had an air of distance about her, as though she was there out of obligation rather than enjoyment. Eric had wanted to introduce himself then, to offer her a drink or a quiet escape from the formalities of the evening, but he hadn't found the opportunity. She was always either in conversation or slipping away toward another part of the room, just out of reach. And now here she was, alone at the bar. Her focus was entirely on the screen in front of her, a faint crease in her brow suggesting she was engrossed in something important. He wondered what it was, an article maybe, or research notes. There was an air of intelligence about her that intrigued him, paired with a subtle vulnerability that made him want to know more. Eric was about to finally make his move when he noticed a figure approaching her from the other side of the bar. A tall man, clean-cut and wearing an expression that immediately set Eric on edge. The man leaned in too close, speaking in a low voice, and Eric caught the slight tension in the woman's shoulders as she tried to brush him off. Her reaction was subtle but telling, and she shifted slightly in her seat as if preparing to stand. The man, however, stepped even closer, his hand reaching out to grip her wrist. That was all Eric needed to see. He set his glass down and stood, his protective instincts taking over. He hadn't known how to approach her before, but now he had every reason. "I believe the lady asked you to leave her alone."
Madeline turned to see a man standing behind her. His voice was deep, commanding, and oddly soothing. He was tall, with dusky blonde hair and a chiseled jaw, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with David's simmering anger. David let go of her wrist, though his eyes flashed with annoyance.
"This is none of your business."
"It is now.
The man replied smoothly.
As the manager of this hotel, I'm going to give you 3 options. Walk away, get escorted out very publicly by security, or have the police involved. Choose wisely."
David hesitated, clearly weighing his options, before muttering a curse under his breath and storming back toward the gala. Madeline exhaled shakily, rubbing her wrist as if to erase the lingering discomfort of David's touch. The stranger stepped forward, his concerned gaze settling on her,
Are you all right?
his tone softening.
That looked unpleasant.
I'm fine, Madeline said, though her voice wavered slightly. Thank you for stepping in. He doesn't take rejection very well.